industrial accidents, ancient
solving
poisoners,
crime,
poison
chemical
prevention.
spills. This is Toxic History.
Dr. Joseph Clemens is the Associate Medical Director of the Nebraska Poison Center and Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine at the University of Nebraska's Medical Center. Thank you, Dr. Clemens. Please take it away.
Hey guys, my name's Joseph Clemens. I chose this topic after coming across it about a year ago. After looking into it, I thought it would make a great toxic history presentation. First, I want to acknowledge some of the limitations when choosing a history topic set mainly in antiquity and the Middle Ages. A lot of the sources I use in this presentation are from the Middle Age or pre-industrial Europe. Hopefully, if we have time, we can dive a little more into these limitations at the end of my presentation. Just know for now that a good amount of these sources are like hundreds of years old. That being said, let's dive into witchcraft, werewolves, and flying ointment, the archaic use of deliriants in European culture, and the origins of the iconic witch and werewolf. So throughout history, numerous cultures have engaged in shamanistic practices using psychoactive plants for healing, medicine, spiritual communication, and the performance of what might be termed magic. In Europe, such practices often involve plants from the Solanaceae family, known for their potent psychoactive and anticholinergic properties. However, contemporary interpretations frequently mischaracterize these traditions, placing them into the context of a religious impression, ignorance, mass hysteria, or even phenomenon like mass poisonings. This presentation aims to reframe the European witch and werewolf archetypes, suggesting that these figures may have been indulging in traditional folk and religious medicine practice, sometimes yielding unintentional or even deliberate psychoactive effects. My goal is that by examining historical accounts and ethnobotanical evidence, we can gain a deeper understanding of how these practices influence cultural perceptions and led to the myths surrounding witches and werewolves in European history. Western culture has its own form of shamanism, embodied in the figure of the witch, which is the European counterpart to the shaman. If witch were a gender-neutral term, this connotation might be a little more clear. Elements of the witch archetype, such as potions and charm, have real historic bases. These practices intersect with psychoactive substances that were available in Europe and later in colonial America, mainly plant-induced deliriants, or as we in the toxicology world like to call them, anticholinergics. In particular, there is a distinction that I want to make between two types of psychoactive drugs, psychedelics and deliriants. With psychedelics, people typically remain aware of their hallucinations and that they're drug-induced. With deliriants, they sometimes don't. For example, someone taking a psychedelic mushroom might see patterns move, but they still know they're hallucinating. In contrast, someone taking a deliriant like henbane or belladonna might genuinely believe that they've traveled to a different place. Solanaceous plants such as datura, henbane, mandrake, and belladonna were widely available to the people in Europe. This family of plants, also called hexing herbs at the time, contained various quantities of atropine and other tropane alkaloids such as hyoscyamine and scopolamine, all of which have some anticholinergic and deliriant effects. When ointments and oils or flying ointments were made from these plants, users hallucinated experiences that they thought fit the classical witch and werewolf narrative, such as flying, attending dark gatherings, or as they call them, sabbaths, encountering spirits or demons, or even transforming into a beast or a wolf. Crucially, they did not recognize these as drug-induced experience. They believed that they really flew out of their barn or attended some demonic sabbath, while in reality they were just unconscious on their floor or on the ground. These ointments, colloquially known as flying ointments, and their subsequent effects have been well documented through historic texts, primary sources, and even art. The concept of hallucinogenic flying ointments dates back all the way to antiquity. In The Golden Ass by Apuleius, the only surviving complete ancient Roman novel in Latin, the sorceress Pamphili uses an ointment to transform herself, illustrating earlier accounts of psychoactive substances in magical practices. In ancient Greek mythologies, the enchantress Circe is renowned for transforming Odysseus' crew into swine in Homer's The Odyssey. Scholars have theorized that she may have employed plants such as mandrake or deadly nightshade, both known for their anticholinergic properties. Notably, mandrake was referred to as Cicerae in the 1st century CE, directly linking it to the myth of Circe. Additionally, during Bacchanalian mystery religion ceremonies in ancient Greece, it is believed that wine was sometimes infused with herbs like mandrake and belladonna to enhance its intoxicating effect. Several scholars propose that the trances experienced by the Pitha, or the priestess at the Oracle of Delphi, were induced by inhaling smoke or applying ointments derived from hyoscyamus species, such as white henbane or black henbane. The association of these plants with the oracle is further suggested by the traditional names, including Apilaris and Pythonian, which links them to the god Apollo. According to myth, Apollo claimed the oracle after defeating the serpent Python, symbolizing his dominion over prophetic insights. The association between flying ointments and the European witch dates back at least into the 14th century. These flying ointments were believed to contain anticholinergic plants from the Solanaceous family, among other ingredients. Such compounds can induce hallucinations, leading users to perceive experiences like flying to a demonic Sabbath, or even transforming into an animal like a wolf. These substances blur the line between hallucination and reality, leading individuals to believe their hallucinations were genuine experiences and confess to fantastical crimes. German pharmacologist Louis Levin described a profound psychological effect of hallucinogenic substances like datura. Quote, "The mental disorder caused by substances of this kind, for instance, datura, has even instigated some persons to accuse themselves before a tribunal. Peculiar hallucinations evoked by the drug have been so powerfully transmitted from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind that mentally uncultivated people believe them to be reality." End quote. In 1680, Elizabeth Stiles testified about ritual practices involving hallucinogenic flying ointments that purposely enabled transportation to gatherings or Sabbaths, reinforcing beliefs in supernatural flight. Quote, "Before they are carried to their meeting, they anoint their foreheads and hand wrist with the oil the spirit brings them. Her forehead being first anointed with a feather dipped in oil, she hath been suddenly carried to the place of their meeting." End quote. In the 15th century, Jordan de Bergamo noted that witches would, quote, "anoint a staff and ride it to the appointed place, or anoint themselves under the arms or in other hairy places," end quote. During Ireland's first recorded witch trial in 1324, accusers of Lady Alistair Kessler claimed they found, quote, "a pipe of ointment, wherein she greased a staff, upon which she ambled and galloped through the thick and thin. Then, when in all manner she listed, she came along," end quote. The applications of these ointments, combined with the act of sitting on a staff or broom with the feet off the ground, may have induced feelings of levity or weightlessness, helping to contribute to the sensation of flying or riding. Additionally, some theories suggest an erotic component to these experiences, potentially linked to the method of ointment application combined with psychoactive effects of the substances. This topic, along with other aspects of female sexual repression throughout history, could warrant an entirely separate presentation, which I'm not going to get into today, but if you guys want to get into that, it's kind of interesting. In the 15th century work for Mercurus, Johannes Nider recounts an incident where a woman claimed to experience nocturnal flights facilitated by flying ointment. Seeking to demonstrate this to a priest, the woman said, quote, "Having placed a large bowl, which was used for kneading dough, on top of a stool, steeped in the bowl and sat herself. Then, rubbing ointment on herself to the accompaniment of magic incantation, she lay her head back and immediately fell asleep." End quote. This account illustrates how such ointments could induce profound sleep accompanied by vivid hallucinations of flight and supernatural journey, reinforcing the contemporary narratives of witch traveling throughout the night. In 1545, Anders Laguna, a physician to Pope Julius III, documented the composition and effects of the hallucinogenic ointments purportedly used by these alleged witches. He notes that, quote, "its odor was so heavy and offensive that it showed that it was composed of herbs cold and saporious in the ultimate degree, which are hemlock, nightshade, henbane, and mandrake," end quote. He later states, quote, "On being anointed, she suddenly slept such a profound sleep, with her eyes open to like a rabbit. She also fittingly looked like a boiled hare, that I cannot imagine how to wake her," end quote. Laguna's observations here align with the symptoms of anticholinergic toxidrome, characterized by altered mental status, pupillary dilation, impaired lens accommodation, and vasodilation flushing. Remember, mad as a hatter, blind as a bat, red as a beet. But if you must remember one documented account of flying ointment and its hallucinogenic properties, remember the following. Giovanni Battista della Porta, a Renaissance scholar, polymath, contemporary of Galileo, offered a physical explanation for the effects of flying ointment. In his work, Magic Naturalis, he detailed the preparation and application of these ointments. The thorough rubbing of the ointment ensured rapid absorption, warming the body and inducing hallucination experiences. Quote, with it, they mix elysium, aconite, poplar branches, and soot, or sometimes seum, acornium, cinquefoil, the blood of bat, sleeping-induced nightshade, and with it, oil. And if they mix in other items, they differ somewhat from these. As soon as it is finished, they anoint the parts of the body, having rubbed them very thoroughly before, so as they grow rosy and heat returns, that which was stiff with cold becomes penetrable. Della Porta recounts the observations where a woman offered to demonstrate the ointment's effect. Quote, she ordered all of us who were gathered there with me as witness to go outside. Then she stripped off all her rags and rubbed herself very thoroughly and heartily with some ointment. She was visible to us throughout the cracks of the door. She then sank down from the force of the soporific juices and fell into a deep sleep, end quote. Instead of flying off into the night, this woman applied flying ointment to herself and just fell into a deep drug-induced delirium. Upon awaking, the woman remained convinced of her imagined travels, despite the evidence to the contrary. Quote, then the power of drug grew weak and feeble, and she, called from her sleep, began babbling that she had crossed seas and mountains to fetch these false answers. We denied, she insisted. We showed the black and blue marks. She insisted more tenaciously than before, end quote. Now let's delve into lycanthropy, or the belief that humans can transform into wolves or other predatory animals. This ancient belief has eventually given rise to the modern concept of the werewolf. Historically, this phenomenon has been linked to the use of deliriants or anticholinergic oils such as flying ointment. A Greek account by Paulus Aginta regarding lycanthropy from the 4th century AD is as follows, quote, those laboring under lycanthropia go out during the night imitating wolves in all things and lingering about until morning. You may recognize such persons by these marks. They are pale, their vision feeble, their eyes dry, tongue very dry, and the flow of saliva stopped. But they are thirsty, and their legs have incurable ulcerations from frequent falls. Such are the marks of the disease. To me, this sounds a lot like anticholinergic toxicity. Interestingly, the effects of these deliriants and ointments appear to differ between men and women. While women often reported experiences of flying and attending nocturnal gatherings, commonly associated with witchcraft, men more frequently describe sensations of transforming into animals, particularly wolves. This distinction may have contributed to the gender narratives of witches and werewolves in folklore. Della Porta, again, documented the transformative effects of hallucinogenic oils in European ritual practices, this time in regards to a man who believed he turned into an animal. He notes that to induce the belief of transformation into a bird or a beast, an ointment comprising henbane, mandrake, and thornapple, and belladonna was employed. These anticholinergic plants could induce a delirious state, leading individuals to genuinely believe they had transformed into an animal such as the wolf. During the 16th century, individuals accused of lycanthropy often believed that wearing animal pelts helped facilitate their transformation into wolves. Similar to how the use of broomsticks in witchcraft rituals was believed to aid in the sensation of flying, wearing pelts was thought to enhance the tactile sensation of fur against their skin, reinforcing their delusions. A notable case is that of Peter Stump, executed in 1589 for alleged werewolfery. According to the contemporary accounts, Stump confessed that a demon had bestowed upon him a magical girdle or pelt, which he claimed enabled his transformation into a wolf. Quote, Peter Stump, who was executed for werewolfism in 1590, confessed that the demon had bestowed a girdle upon him, with which he girt himself when the lust of wolf came upon him to shift into the shape of a wolf, end quote. Jean de Nayade, a French physician, authored a significant work on lycanthropy in 1650 titled On Lycanthropy, Transformation, and the Ecstasy of Witches. In his treatise, he listed ingredients commonly believed to be used in the transformative ointments, including belladonna, henbane, aconite, opium, and hashish. Nayade also asserted that, quote, all shape-shifting is a mere hallucination, end quote, suggesting that at the time, the perceived transformations were known to be psychological rather than physical or spiritual. Supporting this perspective, historical accounts reveal that individuals under the influence of such ointments believed they had transformed into wolves and committed heinous acts. For instance, in 1521, Pierre Bourgault confessed to using ointments which, when applied, he believed changed him into a wolf for 1 or 2 hours. During this time, he claimed to have attacked people, bitten them, or even committed murders. Inquisitor Henry Bigot accounts vividly illustrate how individuals deprived of these ointments believed they could no longer transform into wolves. He observed, quote, "In company with Lord Claude Mayer, our recorder, I have seen those I have named go on all fours in a room, just as they did when they were in the fields. But they said that it was impossible for them to turn themselves into wolves, since they had no more ointment, and they had lost the power of doing so by being imprisoned." End quote. This passage highlights the profound psychological effects these substances had, blurring the line between reality and hallucinations. Individuals believed that without their ointment, they could not achieve their desired transformation. So, in conclusion, the historic use of flying ointments offers a fascinating glimpse into the intersection of European folklore, ethnobotany, and toxicology. These ointments often composed of hallucinogenic plants like belladonna, henbane, mandrake, and aconite, producing profound anticholinergic effects that blur the boundary between reality and hallucination. Through vivid sensations of flight or transformation, individuals believe that they travel to sabbats ridden throughout the night on a broomstick or even transformed into animals like wolves. Confessions obtained during witch trials, often under duress, reflect a pervasive fear of the supernatural, while accounts from scholars like Della Porta, Andres Laguna, Jean Diniad prove evidence that they were likely drug-induced illusions rather than physical transformations. The powerful experience induced by these ointments became entrenched in the cultural narratives of witches and werewolves, leading to our modern interpretation of these monsters. By exploring these historical perspectives, we better understand how science, culture, belief systems intertwine, shaping myths, legends, and societal fears. This perspective reframes witches and werewolves not merely as supernatural figures, but as participants in an ancient tradition of folk medicine and shamanistic rituals, practices that reveal a complex relation between psychology, toxicology, myth, and religion. And then just some limitations. Historical accounts of flying ointment and European witchcraft are subject to several critical limitations that I think we should talk about. So there's skepticism and allegations of fraudulence. So throughout history, many individuals doubted the existence or efficacy of these flying ointments and often dismissed them as fraudulent concoctions or snake oils. A lot of these confessions were made under coercion of torture. So during the witch trials, numerous confessions regarding the creation or use of these flying ointments were extracted under duress. These applications of torture frequently led individuals to admit to practices they might not have engaged in, aiming just to alleviate their suffering. And then there was influence of dominant religious narratives. So interrogations along with witch trials were often conducted within a Christian framework that was mainly preoccupied with the notion of witchcraft and devil worshipping. And this context may have compelled the accuser to describe ointments in a way that aligned with the inquisitor's expectations, sometimes inventing ingredients to satisfy what their interrogators wanted. And then there's challenging just identifying these historic plants. So deciphering the specific plant referenced in historic accounts is challenging. Prior to the 15th century, a lot of documentation sparse, and many of the practitioners were likely impoverished and illiterate, leading to basically reliance on oral traditions and left a paucity of written records on the actual subject. And there was also suppression of knowledge by religious authorities. So the church often deemed the use of these hallucinogenic substances as heretical and actively worked on suppressing information about their use. So the suppression could have hindered the preservation and transmission of the knowledge of what was actually in these substances. These factors can complicate our understanding of the historical use and perception of flying ointments, but I think all around it's still a pretty interesting topic and that needs to be talked about. These are my references. All right, thank you.